Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the little delay there. I think I'm in a good spot now. Hope everybody's having a good Sunday. Um, Starting out, just want to follow up and touch base and see if there's any questions or comments that we had from last week or on Monday. Okay. If not, I think we're at a good point here too. We just want to make sure we're pulling everything together and just making sure that everyone has been following along for the last week too. That we're all on the same page and understanding. And just as a quick overview recap, we're dealing with. Go ahead, Brian.
This is. Can I just add something? On yesterday, Pastor added something that I thought was very significant. I thought you might want to hear about it. I didn't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but he went back and looked at some of the things that happened in Genesis, like, for example, when Abraham dug the well and Isaac, those wells were filled up, and Isaac had to go back and redig them, and he talked about when they crossed the Jordan and them building the altar, and those things being it's part of the memory that you were discussing, and tying that into the eighth sense. So we didn't go really into those scriptures, but I thought it was extremely significant to notice that and see that from a spiritual perspective that shows that this memory that you are describing is a lot stronger than time itself. So that was just one of the things just that I thought was talked about that was noteworthy. Thanks.
No, yeah, I definitely because there's a lot in the when you look at Abraham too and Moses, David. There is a spiritual connection there. It's that memory helps us process what we're going through, and some of the things that we say we've been saying before that may not make sense, but we get it in the end. And just like when we're talking about being able to connect or tap into someone else's power, that memory of that also helps us to process it, and that was probably a better word I wanted to use last week was process. And if we do look back, for instance, Ron, one of the other things that I had mentioned to Pastor was we see Melchizedek represented twice in the Bible. And you talk about Abraham, where he blessed Abraham after Abraham had came back from war and done all he had done to conquer his enemies. Melchizedek basically had communion with him and sort of confirmation or ordained Abraham to become who he was, the father of the nation. So he was ordained in the order of Melchizedek. And when they reference Jesus in I believe it was in Matthew, he was referenced as being ordained in the order of Melchizedek. And that was sort of a process and a memory that was tied into a status of king and priest. And so I think when we look at what we talked about last week about accepting our status and understanding who we are with that status and the power that comes with it, it does, the memory does allow us to get to a place and time where we process all those things and helps us accept who we are. And from a spiritual perspective, we begin to connect with our embedded self, realize we're operating and that we are, in fact, Elohim, and we began to function like it. And so I definitely need to. And I've got to maybe I get some help on the YouTube because I tried looking on it and there was something from 2021, but I may need to do it from a laptop or from something else besides my phone.
On note, when he said that, I went back yesterday, and there were a lot of altars built. There were a lot of things done, even when they were God, I forgot my thought, but all the things that did. Even I was thinking about Esther and the holidays and do this as a memorial and a lot of those things I never stopped to think about as the significance of them and what they represent. So when listen to what, because you've been talking a lot about the memory thing, and even though we've talked about the significance of it, that just opened it all up for me to go back to give thought of all the stuff that we've studied and put more meaning into that, like the word when Isaac redigs the well and he names it. What does he name it? He named it Rehoboth, Rehoboth, and it means a broad place. It means to become large. And when you trace the root of it down, it means to grow or become wide. It means to describe. It describes the result of a place that was empty or made barren. So what this is discussing is this is talking about the earth from the perspective of being awareness, and you digging, you're cultivating the ground so that you can become aware of who you are. And although he dug this well and they took it from him, and he digs another one and they take it from him, and they're digging for one thing, but when he sees what God has done for him, he recognized the awareness, and he has far more than what he had originally started digging for. So just to look at that and kind of open that up, the spiritual significance of how that kind of opens up for him, and just kind of made me want to go back and look at all those things. So yeah, just tying that together, what you've already said, just kind of made it a lot more meaningful.
And the digging, they reference the digging as sort of us reflecting back on our timeline as we go back through things, as we dig through the things in the past, sort of reference the digging the well. And then I saw something else there too when you were talking about the altar. Barbara made a mention of the altar a couple of weeks ago, where that we all have an internal altar in ourselves. And if we think back about what altars represent in the religious aspect in churches, they look at it as the table that's supposed to be for rituals, but really when we talk about going to our altar internally, I view that as a not a ritual, but sort of a cleansing and a sacrifice that we're making to go within ourselves, whether it be you're sacrificing your time, you're digging, but you're taking yourself away from everything. And so when we go to that altar in our meditative state, I view the altar as not like a religious sacrifice, but I view it as a way for us to step back from ourselves to really go not before a wooden table or bench, but to go somewhere where we're just we're sacrificing, we're concentrating, and we're pouring our true selves out, and it's all done internally. And so that phrase, leave it at the altar, I view that as a deep meditative state within us to the altar inside of us where we're just leaving everything that we have there and we're putting those memories in order. We're cleansing our thoughts. We're doing all the things we need to do that when we leave that altar, unlike the religious aspect, when we leave that altar spiritually, internally, everything's in order, and whatever we needed to sacrifice for ourselves or to uncover for ourselves, we leave there with a better understanding of who we are and our identity. And so that's how I kind of view the altar for us as an internal place we can go where things are just stripped away and we leave it there and we leave that place with a better understanding of who we are, if that makes sense.
It makes perfectly good sense. It's an opportunity for you to be truthful with self. So it's almost like looking in the mirror and seeing who you really are and who you have defined or described yourself to be, and making that choice. This is who I really am. Elohim is showing me my true self. So I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna strip away all these pretenses and all these prideful things and my ego. I'm gonna leave here, and I make room for truth. I make room for Elohim to fill me and to show me who I am. So yeah, I agree with you. It just, when you stop and look at those things and look at every time they stopped and built an altar and what all that meant, it just takes on more meaning than I'd ever seen before. So
yeah, because and the thing about digging a well, you dig the well until you hit pay dirt, and so that means that until you hit the water, and you're going to keep digging until you hit that. It's a monotonous task. It's a humbling task, and it's a task that's done with a lot of discipline. And there used to be these old chain gang movies, and we're just digging holes, and it's digging holes just to dig it. It's repetitive, just discipline stuff, but there's not a why. But I don't know if anybody else experiences this. But sometimes when I'm locked in on just doing one thing, and it's something that's going to take a long time, like painting a room or painting a couple rooms. When you first look back at the unpainted walls, and you're looking at, it's going to take a while. But good painter, you're not going to worry about the part of just getting it done. You're going to reflect on what's done when you get done. You want to cut it in right. You want to get it painted. And when you're done, it's like, that took a little while, but that process of doing it and the concentration of doing it while you're doing it, making an unpainted wall into something that you want to finish, it's a gratifying process, but it's calming. And I think a lot of times we don't realize that we miss on so many things that calm us by being active on one thing that helps us stay calm. And those are just a lot of the things that this A-Sense pulls in. You could be doing a monotonous, hard labor work, but sometimes it calms you as well because you're really just focused on the motion and the process. You're not worried about the results at the time. You're living through the process, and I think memory helps us process things. Any questions or comments on that? And I will say this, just to touch base on, Melchizedek one more time in regards to the memories, and that was an energy too that Abraham tapped into, Jesus tapped into. So there was an energy of of accomplishment and status. If anyone's ever gotten a promotion, or not equating it to anything spiritual, but just the part of getting a promotion or an achievement at work or job or school, and you look at, you get it, and when you first receive it, it doesn't sink in yet. We get things sometimes that it just doesn't sink in for us. It's like, okay, yeah, I have this position now, or I've accomplished this. Yeah, it really doesn't sink in for us. And so when we go back and we talk about the status and the ability, the power we have at our disposal, and who our identity is, we say we're Elohim, and we talked about it last week, how tough of a journey it can be. And we say it sometimes, and it doesn't sink in yet. It doesn't sink in yet that you are Elohim. But the key is, once you begin to use it and operate and function in the order of Elohim, it becomes more real to you. And I think that's what Abraham and Jesus, that encounter with Melchizedek, it became real for them because they're using it now. And I think we all come to a point where we have a Melchizedek experience, where we're coming face to face and with the epitome and of who we're supposed to be and function. And we get that chance to use it and operate like that. And that very first feeling of it, you understand, okay, wow, now I get it. And so for a lot of us, that identity is there. We got to make it real to us when we use it. And once you begin to use it and function and be that, we get it. We get it at that point. So it's no different than someone being put in a status of a chief or whatever, but until they actually have to function as an authority, it doesn't seem real to them. So I was trying to make a good example of that, how we can actually coordinate with ourselves to make it real and organize things in ourselves to make it real. And so that's why we need the memory. Because that memory, it takes you back. You function, you see that journey, whether it's digging a hole, you think back to those things that enlightened you and brought you wisdom a lot. And we think back to the things that we may have made mistakes on, but it still brought us light, enlightenment, and wisdom because it helped mold us and help kind of drive us forward by processing and fixing the problem. So it is my hope today is that we see how all these things kind of tie in together, and it ties in together for us. And I wanted this lesson really overall to be kind of a how-to. How do we do these things? And how do we process and actually put them to use? And so yeah, I definitely want to go back and listen to that about the well too, and get every aspect of that the pastor was talking about. Any questions of that so far or comments?
Yeah, good morning, ST.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again, what you're speaking in reference to is definitely resonates, with myself and hopefully with others. But the words that, I'm hearing is when you talk about the importance of self-awareness, as you have spoken of in the past, and then also you talked about spiritual disciplines. And I think the words that we speak, the words that we meditate on, the utterances that we speak out of the depths of our soul is the creative process when you talk about, effective communications. And like I said, it resonates with me so strongly that, again, it's the words that we speak. And so as we speak these words, in the confidence of who we are, then we will see the manifestations, of, our desires. And so, again, I just wanted to share those thoughts in terms of just the words that I'm hearing. in my spirit. And again, just again declaring and affirming, that what you're talking about. So it does resonate with myself and hopefully with others. But I just wanted to share those thoughts, ST. I'm done.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, because I just, just to echo what you said, when it resonates with us, it just feels like, okay, you feel like, okay, I actually can do it, and you know, and it just the power is there. Like it's something that we've been doing all our life and building up to. And when you recognize that awareness is uncovered, it's not the end of it too. It's just the beginning. Get people that go to school for accounting and they have an accounting degree. They got their CPA certification. Well, that starts really they're a true accountant when they actually start doing accounting work. And until they actually start performing the work, they just have the degree. And but they still have accomplished it. Like you said, it's kind of we speak things into existence, and we create day in and day out. And when we're really aware of our creation, you know it just makes it feel that much better of a bond. I mean, there's no better feeling than when you see something that you've created, that you've done, whether it be on purpose or even by just subconsciously, and you see that the effect it has on someone else and how much it really it's really helped someone else. And I mean, I don't think there's a better feeling in the world as far as actions that we can do. That when we do something that's unselfish, when we do it, we're not looking for any kind of reward. We just do it because we are. And when you think back and you see how that's had an impact on someone else and how it's helped them, how it could may have brought them through something, and it could have been something small, but our reward is just being who we are. And that's no better feeling as far as like just doing something from an unselfish standpoint of no notoriety is needed. You just do it because you are. But when you see how that impacts, that's where it just kind of like George has said, it's just a confirmation, and that's how we begin to operate and walk and understand of who we are. We get confirmations all the time, and that's just going to be embedded in our memories. It's going to help us facilitate the information, but help us power, help us process and respond. And when we recall things, we'll be able to look back and say, I learned this. So we'll be able just to retain all those things moving forward for the next phase of it. And that's why Jesus always, when Jesus and Abraham both encountered their Melchizedek or their Melchizedek experience, it was just basically a confirmation of what they've been taught and what they've learned. And it just kind of helped them going forward that they can always retain this wisdom, tap into it whenever it was necessary. And that's what we have too. Like we've gotten so much from the teachers, from Pastor Barbara, Kathy, Ron, Nick, people, Sheldon, and people are just teaching. You may not bring up their lessons right then. I know there's several things that Kathy talked about 3 years ago, and just at some point I can go back and recall that because I've retained that information. I heard what was said, and just bring it forward at that point in time. And so that kind of goes back into that part of it where we talked about being where you need to be, when you need to be there, and who you need to be at that time. It just makes a big difference for us. And any other comments? No, but I appreciate it, George.
Good morning. This is Evelyn. ST, everything that we're learning, and when we embrace that we are Elohim, things are really manifesting. Because last week, Monday, as a matter of fact, before I got out of my car to go into work, I said, you know what? I got to change the energy in this building. I work for a state agency. And when I said that, about once I got in and logged in or whatever, about 2 hours after I had said that, the deputy director started coming to people and walking them down to their car, taking them out of the building. And I know there's more a lot of people got fired last week. Even on the board that I work on, a lot of people got fired. So I just want everybody to be mindful. We have to really be careful about what we say and make sure that the intent is right. Make sure this is what you want, because it may not happen the way you want it to happen, but you're going to get what you asked for. So what we're learning is very important. And I just want to make that comment.
No, thank you. Because our energy and our awareness of our surroundings is so important. And going back to the example that Barbara used a couple of weeks ago about just, when you're in a restaurant, you could sense the things, a table over, or just, and then in that moment, we have the ability to kind of step back and withdraw ourselves and remember, who we are. And I think me and Roy had a conversation earlier this week, and we just talked about just no matter what, we get sidetracked, always bring it back to your identity. Always bring it back to who we are. And Joyce says this all the time. I am. Just be who you are at that moment, and everything will be fine. And things come, experiences come to panic us, to help us, basically distract ourselves through creating our own anxiety, creating our own challenges. We can create all these different scenarios, but at the end of the day, just remember who we are, and who we are is even more important than the creation, because if we create based on who we are, those offsprings of our thoughts will be reflected. It's kind of like the tree from the fruit it bears. So our identity is so crucial to us, and being who we are, it makes any situation seem small, and we just don't get overwhelmed. And that's all a part of our growth process too, as we look back at things. If you look back in the past at something that overwhelmed you 5 years ago, I think it's a safe bet to say that I think that we're on this call now, and if those things happened 5 years ago and they happen to us again today, I think we won't feel as overwhelmed or challenged as we were back then, just because of the growth we have. At least I'm just speaking from my perspective, and just a lot of people on this call that I know and we interact with too. I mean, I think we see that growth over a period of time, and not becoming overwhelmed or stress seems to been one of the growth points that I've seen from a lot of people. And so, Evelyn, thank you for that, because and especially at work, we spend a lot of our time. Those of us that that are there at work spend a lot of your time there. And so, from a standpoint of your week, the majority of our week is spent on a job or at the place where we work, and we interact with all sorts of people there. And I tell my son bag groceries at the grocery store here, and it's like, just interact, be consistent, even when people come up and they're not having. He's like, he'll come home and say, man, people were mean today. It's like, no, you just be consistent. Your consistency, being who you are, is going to overshadow anything that kind of like comes up, because you don't know what that person went through that day or what their thought process was before coming into the store. And I take that perspective now and not necessarily judging anyone, looking at how to solve anybody's problems, because sometimes we volunteer to help people's problems, or we volunteer information, and it may not be the right time. Let's go back to what George said. He always says that you just want to be who I am and be who we are at that point, and it all works out. Because sometimes we just can't fix it for that person without them really just fixing it for themselves first, because everything starts from within. It never starts from the outside. It may manifest and appear externally, but we control it. We fight it from within. And anyone else had a comment on that?
Hey, Steve, this is Charles. Can you remember by focus on your ancestors, the things they, mold you in, and the way they mold you in? Can you do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So view our ancestors as the first five. This is just an example. View your ancestors as the first five senses and how they taught us how to operate and function and move through the earth this way. And they gave us a lot of wisdom. They gave us a lot of insight. And, we have a tendency to tell and tell people how good things were back 15 years ago. And I make a point of trying to correct myself with this when I'm dealing with my kids. We talk about different stuff, and they're like, and this, you got to be able to relate to them now. So I try not to tell them, hey, how good things were 10, 20 years ago, or how better this version of something was. Because the reality is, it shouldn't be a better version of what was done 20 years ago. And so when I look at our ancestors, that relationship, I look at them giving us a strong foundation, giving us a lot of wisdom, and teaching us a lot. And then we're supposed to expand on that. We're supposed to take what they gave us and make it into a newer version. We're supposed to actually be able to become more creative, more understanding of our identity, and get closer to ourselves. Because that was the origin. The origin is there. Remember, we talked about everything that was created in this earth is here for us now. The ingredients are all here. And so basically our ancestors, they give us a strong foundation to where we're mature and we understand how things operate. But at that point in time, they also give us the ability to start learning for ourselves and to take what they've given us and become a Charles, become an ST off that insight and wisdom that they've given us. And to, our responsibility from that point is to grow it, is to nurture what they've taught us, and to internally from ourselves take that where we're at and take it to the next level. And so I do try and always reflect back on the teachings that my mom, grandmother, and uncles, dad gave me. But then also when I reflect on those memories, that was reflecting on their growth as well. But I didn't necessarily see their growth. I can just hear what they told me and their experiences were with their growth. We all have to take that and translate it or transfer it to our life and make our growth happen based on that information, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
going back to something else last week too, Charles, we learned, when we talk about tapping into someone's power and understanding, we learn from each other. I mean, like by sharing and communicating, like George said earlier, there's no better teacher than listening and communicating. But if we listen to what someone's sharing and we truly listen, we're going to be able to learn from that. And we're going to just listen to what they said. Okay, I'm going to go back to my place, whether it be my deep meditative state, whether it be like digging the well. I'm going to take that back and I'm going to apply it and I'm going to learn it and I'm going to process it for myself. And when I process it internally, I'll know what to do with it. But our two biggest aspects is being able to learn, is listening, and then being able to share. And so every time we share, we're learning. Every time someone raises a question on this call or they share something, we're learning because we're processing it. And that process all deals with our senses, our memories, our intuition, our wisdom. Every time there's something shared, we learn and we're able to grow from it. So it's sort of like a plant. A plant grows every day, but you don't necessarily see it. You don't see the growth every day. But when you look back at some point, you're like, okay, wow, this thing is getting big, it's growing, and so that's us.
Yes, it's Ron again. You said something significant, though. I want to see if I understand it. And so yesterday, like for example, you and Will spent some time together, right? And you raise your children, or you go about your day, and we interact with each other, and you do things out of love. You do things based on just who you are. And you not knowing that these things that seem mundane have a spiritual hidden meaning to them. So thousands of years ago, here this man digs a well to make sure that his family and his farm, the people in the region have something to live on. He builds an altar when he sees himself and recognizes the Creator, and all these things are part of a self-survival, not realizing that there's a spiritual hidden meaning in it because of who he is connected to. So because you recognize that you're Elohim, the spirit of the ancestor lives in those mundane things that we do. And when you reflect back on them, you see it more than just the physical action that was done. You see and understand the spiritual message behind it. And I just kind of heard that or saw that when you said that. We having the same, when you talked about your uncles and stuff and your family, their thing was just out of love, doing what they're supposed to do, not recognizing that those actions may affect people 1,000 years from now. Does that make sense at all? We everything we do then as Elohim has a spiritual message to it, a spiritual meaning.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, like I just keep simple phrase that George said several weeks ago. I am because we are. If you think back, going back to the Melchizedek again, he has no genealogy. Everybody else in the Bible, it talks about their parents, their descendants, their rise. Nowhere in there does it reference Melchizedek's genealogy or his beginning. And I think, this is just, let's see, use your word, supposition here. I think he is the embodiment of I am because we are. He is more of an description of what we should be when we're at our highest level. And I think that's when Abraham recognized, when Jesus recognized it. The reason he has no genealogy because he is who he is. I am because we are. He is what he is, and that's all. And so going back to what you said, Rob, those things help us uncover who we are, and once we uncover who we are, then it begins to become our responsibility really, instead of looking up, looking down, or externally of resolving problems and functioning day in and day out. Once we are truly aware of who we are, we take on that responsibility for ourselves too, because the guidance that the Creator has given us, that guidance now comes from within, and we understand how to tap into it. And just trying to impart that, like I said, we talked to Will yesterday, just about, whatever decision you make, it's going to be a decision you're going to have to be comfortable with, but it's also, no matter where you go, it's going to be a time for growth. It's going to be a time for you to really start experiencing and doing things on your own so that you can continue to develop for yourself. Because it's almost like when kids mature, as a parent, you're guiding them and you're part of their philosophy. Their philosophy of life comes from what you're giving them. But they mature and they begin to get older, they're going to have to apply that. And that's that whole growth and maturity state. They're going to have to apply that from within. A lot of times they say, well, okay, I've taught the kids all I can do. You give them a good foundation. And we looked at, okay, we're going to build up on it. But really, what you're starting to do is you're giving that foundation, but it's more of an internal spiritual foundation. And they're going to have to start building from within on that and creating for themselves, learning how to be their own creators and their environment, so like what Evelyn touched on earlier. And they will have to get their own face-to-face with the Melchizedek moment where you truly understand. I can tell him that he's Elohim all he wants, all I want to, but he's going to have to get that face-to-face and that full awareness of, okay, yeah, I understand what Dad was telling me now, as I feel it for myself, and then he's going to be taking that responsibility, because now he's not going to benefit the most from external help. His help's going to have to come from within, and he's going to have to help himself. And that's, whether you position yourself to, Coach always says, be where you're supposed to be, do what you're supposed to do, and when you're supposed to be doing it. And we apply that internally to this lesson. It's just like we just have put ourselves in that position as individuals, and we've helped guide others beneath us or younger, immature. You can only guide them to a certain point, and then their guide has to start coming from within. And I think when you look at Moses, Abraham, Jesus, John, the apostles, all these guys at some point had to come to that realization that, okay, now it's within me now. It's within my power. I have to start operating from that aspect and not more like an external person or follower. And, we talk about being followers and leaders, but no matter what, that intuition, that growth, that reflection, all has to help them from within at that point. And one other thing I was thinking of too, Ron, when I was just saying that, several weeks ago, I think we made the comment about how we were putting so much emphasis on faith and what faith meant to us, and really defining what faith truly is. I think we did put a lot on faith and not enough on righteousness. And from this standpoint of we talk about righteousness, that's one of the other things that we find out about ourselves when we realize who our true identity is that we learn the real meaning of righteousness. And we find out that, I won't say overemphasize, but we find out we overemphasized or put too much on just faith. And then it's kind of a scary thought to say, God, I have to try and be righteous all the time. I don't think we really understand the grasp between the two. And I think sometimes we underplay what a righteous man is. And we kind of overplay faith in the sense of trying to push the burden to something external, if that makes sense. Any questions on that?
Yeah, this is Barbara. Good morning. Righteousness is a state of being in a sense, and it's a state of functioning on what you believe you are as Elohim. Faith says, I trust this, I trust something, but it also, the bigger question is, do you trust yourself? Because that's who you are. And when you say, I have faith this will happen, I have faith this will happen, I have faith this will happen, well, part of functioning as Elohim is going beyond that faith and acting on all that you are and all that you know you are. It's like you said, when you've gone to school, you've learned a trade or you've learned a profession. I can say I have faith that you're going to be good at this or you're going to be good at. Well, I can have all the faith in the world, but until you start acting on that and becoming and being and functioning in the role that you are prepared to function in, then where's my faith? In a sense, it's still kind of external. So what we as Elohim do is we, like the Holy Spirit gives life, we give life to that faith. We make it a manifestation of who we are instead of something that's always external to us.
And I knew you could pull that together for me there. I appreciate it because that is. I was trying to think about how to put in the words. I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking, because when we take it, we deny. We talked a little bit about denying your awareness of who you are. We talked about what the denial looks like. Part of that denial is too that we view righteousness as something that was so far away from us, so something that's hard to obtain for us to manage or do, and we replace that with just saying, okay, I'm going to have faith, but not really looking into the righteous aspect of who we are that's embedded in our identity. And so what we do is we kind of deny that, and we tend to push the narrative of I'm going to have faith, and we kind of pass the buck, so to say, on who we are, or just kind of a way for us to kind of deny it. And so that like you said, those are two great definitions of faith and righteousness. Righteousness is just it's that state of being, and that's who. When I referenced Jesus and Abraham having their Melchizedek moment, it was it was awareness to a state of being. They understood, okay, that the righteousness that they were and possessed and who they were was just a way for them to be it. And so we should move to that point of being righteousness and being a righteous person, and just that's who we are versus being a prayerful and man of faith, woman of faith, and just be who we are and be that state of righteousness. And that was kind of the comparison. And I'm not saying by no means that we shouldn't have faith, but apply that faith to the abilities and the identity of who you are, and don't look at righteousness as something that is hard to attain or maintain. Look at it as a state of being. And that state of being, it affects what you create, and everyone that comes into your center, your energy, your presence. Look at it as a state of being. But I thank you all. I appreciate that.
Good morning. Just a statement. When we see righteousness, let's make sure that we all give it some attention. And what I mean by when we see righteousness, when you see a young kid say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, excuse me, pardon me, let's give him some attention or give her some attention. I like how you speak. See, when we out here seeing righteousness, in some cases, we don't respond to it. We don't exalt it. When you see the African-American male, $75,000 a year before taxes or after taxes, he's the only one working in that household. Keep him encouraged. Same thing with the wife. If she working too, keep her encouraged. So when you see some righteous stuff going on out here, make sure we giving it some attention. You see your brother at a game and he just got off work. Hey, you look dynamite in that outfit. Whoop, 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 whoop. Same thing with the sister. So when you see it, give it some attention, because anything that's right, R-I-G-H-T, we get that attention all day long. We'll exalt it. We'll even make it our God. So when we see righteousness, make sure, and the same thing go for myself. When I see at 51 years of age, sometimes I deal with some 21-year-olds, and they'll say, yes, sir. There's a part of me that want to say, hey, you ain't got to call me yes, sir. But I'm not going to say that, because I'm not going to damage how mama and daddy raised that child. And you will see that out here. You will see 51-year-olds. Well, I know you see it out here, because educated African-American females let kids call them by their first name. Now, I done seen that. Some of y'all done seen that. That ain't righteous. So when righteousness is being done by someone else, let's make sure we give it some attention. And if you see righteousness being done, and I'm with you, tap me on the shoulder. Hey, George, that person just did something good. Let's cheer them on. So when we see it, let's give it some attention, and let's stop giving attention to things that's right. That's it.
Appreciate that, George. One of the things I'll say is, when we acknowledge who the other person is, their identity, we understand that, whether it's a 20-year-old, 60-year-old, that connection ties us together. Yeah, I like that. You know, you're referencing the respect aspect of it to how we are acknowledging someone being respectful, and we're acknowledging that they have the manners and that they're on a good path, but also we don't we don't judge, and so your message in life could be coming from that same 25-year-old person. But I think more importantly, overall, let's connect with them based on our identity and who we are, and be who we're supposed to be who we are in that moment. And all those things will fall under that umbrella. It won't be a challenge because going back to, you know, what righteousness is, righteousness is a state of being. And, someone could tell me, yes, sir, all day long, but they don't understand who they are, and they're operating under religious philosophy that may keep them from understanding their identity, or a philosophy in life that restricts them from finding out who they are. Eventually, that person becomes stuck. We talked about being in a place of being stuck or bogged down, and so that mutual respect of being who you're supposed to be at the right time, it will have an effect on that person. You will be able to help them grow, because at the end of the day, if I help you and you become aware of who you are, truly who you are, it's enough said. There's nothing that needs to be done, because that you can't replace that identity. Now you have, just to piggyback on what you just said, George, you have some kids who are in the process and they're finding it, and me acknowledging their manners and how I see them, it will help them in that process, in that search for their identity. But the most important thing we have to do is also remove the barriers and help someone become aware of who they are, because eventually we keep going back to it. It's something they're going to have to do from within. But I do agree that should we encourage it? Absolutely. Should we always connect? And that ability to help them become aware is going to be the biggest gift that we can give them. But ultimately, they have to get to that point where they're having their Melchizedek moment, or their awareness, and that awareness allows them to be, I am because we are, and it's a two-way street. But that connection, that communication, that sharing, that's how you build that bond. Because if they're talking a different language, then it's it's different. And honestly, like in the military, there's always a saying that you ask before you act. So in other words, if I say, hey George, can I, you're George Watson, in a formal setting, Mr. Watson, but communicate, connect you, I can ask your permission as well. Instead of saying, Mr. Watson, can I call you George? You can grant me that ability to say yes or no at that moment. So look at it from a spiritual aspect. I'm acknowledging that you're Mr. Watson spiritually, or I'm acknowledging that you're Elohim, because I know that's your identity. But it depends on where your awareness is. So there's not a word for me to call you that, but how we respond to interact and communicate makes a big difference, if that makes sense. I didn't know if you were going to say something else, George. I'm sorry.
ST,
No,
did
I'm good, boss.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Charles.
well, what I was getting ready to ask you, did Abraham recognize uh, Melchizedek? Did Melchizedek had to introduce him to him? He introduced himself to him.
Abraham recognized him once he, once he came back, and for those who, Melchizedek was the priest and king of Salem, or Jerusalem, as we know now. So he was the first one to be king and priest at the same time. And so when he came across Abraham, and he basically celebrated Abraham's victory over his enemies, but more importantly, he let Abraham know, and he sort of use the word that George Clark said earlier. He confirmed with Abraham that you are Elohim, and I'm going to, anoint you and recognize your status. And so when he, quote unquote, we're using this word ordained Abraham, you have the acknowledge the name change and everything, and Abraham received all of that through his discipline, and that was one, I think that was what was recognized, is that, not only this is your identity, but you received your identity because you've been disciplined, and what you've created now will always be. And so Melchizedek approached him and basically anointed him and gave him the confirmation of his status, and basically acknowledged his righteousness too because of Abraham's discipline.
Thank you, man.
And Melchizedek also means king of righteousness. For anyone else, he was king of Salem, king of peace, with no genealogy, and the name Melchizedek, it means king of righteousness. So I just actually looked that up. And then the fact that he had no genealogy, which just meant that there's no history of his parents or birth or anything like that. It is the epitome of being who he's supposed to be. And so that was what he passed on to Abraham through his promise, and that God made to God's promise. And it just says, basically you're a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So that was just something that we can look at from a memory standpoint of identity, but it was done. And Jesus referenced that. If you want to go back from spiritual lineage, Jesus referenced that and understood that too when he was in the order of Melchizedek. So I think that order really is becoming the king of righteousness and the king and priest at the same time, is what these guys are understanding and becoming aware of at that moment in time, and true aspect of their identity. But thank you, Charles.
Thank you, ST.
Uh-huh. Any other questions or comments on that? And going back to what Ron, opened up with, the memory. If you look at yours, your parents, memory helps us with our identity. But it helps us look back and analyze ourselves over a course of time, over a period of time. And you just take that mental trip back And it's just, I don't know why I came up today like this, but it's so important for us to think about that. You take that trip back, and that's how you find out, what's embedded in you. We've been referencing the breadcrumbs, in the matrix, red pill, blue pill, to really go back to, or even in Genesis, and I think Ron did a lesson years ago about going back to beginning. Everything we need to know that's ahead of us, we go back to beginning, and so the memory allows us to go back to beginning and establish ourselves and understand what's embedded in us. And it just kind of helps us reinforce that self-identity to where we are present day. And all the things we've learned from memory helps us integrate these other senses. And all the things we learned from touch, taste, smell, hearing, and then from the equilibrium to now we're just really trying to integrate them all together. All those things are kind of held together by the memory. It's kind of and I hated biology, but it's kind of a homeostasis. It's kind of like how everything, gets stabilized, and it's kind of a balance and equilibrium that brings us together. You've had your inner self, your outer self. It brings that together, and it helps us function from our past, our present, and our future. Those are things that we balance by acknowledging our memory and allowing the memories to help us go back to the beginning. If that makes sense, hopefully. And if you think back, some of the things we did were counterintuitive to that. It kind of kept us away from our identity. We've done some things that were ritualistic in the past that sort of you focus more on the ritual than who you were. And so those memories are different. I can tell you, like, when I was growing up, most months have 4 Sundays, and and many of us were like this too. Each Sunday was labeled first, second, third, fourth Sunday, and every now and then you had a fifth Sunday, which was in my church Women's Day program. Second Sunday as a kid, I knew that was going to be the longest service of the month because that was communion, and you knew which person was going to speak that day. So there were a lot of things that were ritualistic, and we did them because of time and not necessarily intuition. And so I'm moving away from that now, where everything is strictly based on truth and intuition and what we're feeling, what we're hearing, what we're listening and sharing. It actually opens up our senses, and it makes us more sensitive to everything that we are hearing and ingesting, and then you get to function from an internal aspect because you're not based on time or schedule. You're based on where you are at that point in moment, what you need, what you're dealing with, what's your struggle, what your mindset is. And so all those things kind of embedded in who we are from an identity standpoint, and memory helps us shape that so we can measure how we move forward. And memory helps us in the midst of all those things. Once we start getting that self-awareness and we start peeling back the distractions and moving the blindfolds, memory helps us find our identity in the midst of all those things. And as you journey through it, you journey beyond those things, and it becomes an intuition. It becomes a self-learning. It helps you through that identity process. And I'm sure, like a lot of what was said yesterday, sort of tied into that too. You really remove the barriers and distractions, and it becomes So Ron said earlier, you can't deny yourself. If you're feeling a certain way, that's how you're feeling. You know how you're feeling, then you deal with it internally. But if you're feeling a certain way, but on the outside I'm projecting and I'm not feeling a certain way, there takes a deep connection for someone outside of you to understand. Okay, you're not feeling good. Something's bothering you. What's going on? Where if someone doesn't have a connection, they don't know you as well, you can fool them. And so that's when you go through states of fooling people like, I'm great, but you know in your own heart that, hey, I've got to deal with something. There's an opportunity for me to grow internally, and I need to take advantage of that. So those are differences of what we're dealing with now from a connection standpoint and coming back from different aspects of our life, because the person that you're connecting with, they know you a little more and they can sense when you just may need to talk. You may need to do something. Someone that doesn't know you as well, you can avoid them and they can avoid you because they're just thinking everything's good, or you can, get around, I guess being found out or whatever. And that's why it's just such a balance. Any comments, questions on that?
Hey, it's Ron. I like that. I like what you said. And for me, I guess just putting it in my own words, the memory and looking at it from what we've discussed the last couple of days kind of helps me set my direction. It gives me a starting point. We've studied Genesis and we've looked at what it means to be born again or return to beginning. We've looked at several things that point in that direction, and it is, and I gain something from it every time we study it, and I see it. But when we talk about the memory and starting from that perspective, in the spiritual sense, if I only look at memory as far as my life concerned, that has a finite beginning and ending. But from the spiritual perspective, the way we're discussing it and tying it together with the understanding of everything we've discussed in the last few years, especially here lately, the utterances and you opening up this eighth sense. You take the back off that, you take the glass ceiling off of that memory, and you make it a thing of spirit and energy, and so that ties me together. That ties me to pulling from you and from Barbara and Kathy and Pastor and everybody, even who don't teach, that ask questions and that line up on this phone every week and give their energy. It pulls us together with the Abrahams and the Melchizedeks and all the ones that have come before us and stand with their arms open, ready to guide us. So it opens all that up, and that's the direction that I see now. That's the treasure chest that is available to us. So it just kind of helped me to see this from I guess a broader perspective, and kind of put a face on it as to now I know in my meditations which way to turn and probably can get to where I want to get to, if not faster, in a clearer way. So I hope that makes sense. But thank you. The discussion has been extremely helpful.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. Every time we go to the beginning, we get a better understanding of who we are. Every time we go back to a particular point in our life and reflect on it, we get a better understanding of our identity. And those experiences that were driven internally that help us, because it's just like if if anyone's, which I can raise my hand, if anyone's ever taken a class and you didn't do well in that class, and you had to take it over again, the same class again, and you go back, yeah, you've gotten experiences, but when you start looking at learning and learned behavior, if I failed statistics and I have to retake that class, I'm going back to the beginning of it again. And I analyze, okay, did I not study on this theory enough, or I didn't do this enough? But every time we go back to the beginning, we understand about our better self, we understand our identity. So when you get the opportunity to take something over again, you're not taking it over from where you left off. You're going back again, and you're breaking down and learning the concepts again. You're taking it all apart again. And so when we go back to the beginning, from a memory standpoint, it really uncovers a lot that's been embedded in us. We analyze and we look at ourselves and all the things that we've done, and that just makes us, we go back to be a better present. We go back to the past to be better in the present, and we make better decisions in the future because of our past. And then we ultimately give that past, this uncovers who we are, who our identity is, and it's just so much easier to build on your identity and become more comfortable with everything that you're doing. Going back to the beginning makes that a lot easier for us. But I did understand everything you said, Ron. I appreciate it applied, directly to what we're talking about.
If I will, I just also want to add something else. You said, Esther, you're talking about righteousness. Barbara remind me that, can I ask her, for a more detailed explanation of righteousness? And she takes me back and said it is the way you think and speak and act, your actions, in accordance with the utterances. And, that separates righteousness from being right. There are things, being right, I think of you can be ethical, you can be lawful, but righteousness is taking things a step further. It is the way of life. And if anybody want to go back into that a little further, I guess we can. But it just is different than just doing something right and just saying yes, sir. Although that's a beautiful start and a beautiful beginning, it hopefully that takes you further. And in discussing the eighth senses, that just talks about that transformation, how we get there. Just wanted to add that so we can kind of have a understanding of that the righteousness is a little deeper than just saying and doing the right thing sometimes.
No, I agree. I totally see that, Ron, because what if you're in a situation where we talked about the person who's following I'm trying to go back to the scripture that we talked earlier. You're following a certain philosophy, and in the end, that philosophy is death because, it's Proverbs 16:25. And it says, there's a way that seems right to the man. There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. And so when it comes comes to the righteousness and faith part of it, we're having faith in a philosophy that seems right, but in the end, it wasn't exactly the righteous thing. And so being righteousness allows us to not make that mistake, because your actions are based on an awareness of who you are and who you're being at that. And so it shapes the righteousness in that regard, that it's truly going to be a righteous decision, and it's not going to be a decision that was just based off of faith, but the righteousness and understanding of the awareness of who we are allows us to make that decision, being influenced by who we are and not based on what we want the outcome to be. And a righteous decision, it can't be shaped by external factors. It can't be shaped by a particular outcome we want to be. That righteous decision is made because the person making it was being what righteousness is and being Elohim. And so I think we can confuse the making a right decision, like you said, versus making a righteous decision. A right decision can be made just based on the ability that I don't want to lose anything. I don't want to forfeit anything. So if I do this the right way, then I'll benefit from it. The righteous decision is going to be made based on an awareness of who we are, based on what my intuition, my wisdom, all these things that are integrated together tells me what to do. And it's going to be for the benefit of mankind versus, and it's going to be for the benefit of the universe versus just making a right decision. Because ultimately I can make a right decision, but that decision may be based on me not wanting to lose something, if that makes sense.
It does, and I was trying to think of an example as you were talking. There is a term called groupthink, and groupthink is extremely powerful. You see it in adolescence a lot. When one trend starts, everybody does it because they don't want to stand alone. They don't want to, whether or not they believe in it or not. You had, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a police shooting in Chicago, and I think 30 some odd officers were out there when one young man was gunned down. And you can't tell me that all 30 of them thought that was the right decision and the right thing to do. But nobody stood up, and everybody was afraid to oppose what had been done. And groupthink is an energy that takes over and like a tidal wave and kind of pushes things in that direction. And you feel hopeless and powerless to move against it. And it may seem like the right thing to do. And as far as the law is concerned, it won't be questioned, but intuitively, you know that was not right. And you should have had the courage, or the something in you should have moved to do something different, at least to stand up and oppose it. But that was not done. So when you talk about righteousness, it talks about that intuitiveness, that faith, that courage, that willingness to stand alone, that willingness to stand up for justice no matter what. And even if it causes you your life, are you willing to oppose those things? Are you willing to stand by yourself? Are you willing to face the judgments and the ridicule that comes with being right by with standing alone? So it is a very powerful spiritual thing, and can can offer you much to gain, but from a worldly perspective, is what most people fear when they think of something like that. And most people are afraid to make those kind of judgments, and that's what separates truth and spirituality and religion from religions, rather. Thank you.
Ron? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Barbara.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
S and Ron, as you guys are talking about righteousness and Melchizedek, it made me reflect on why Melchizedek did not have a genealogy. We talked about symbology yesterday. Symbology yesterday. And Pastor gave the example of the Egyptians and how they seemingly from somebody's perspective worship the animals, but he said they didn't really worship those animals. Those animals were not seen as gods, but were reflective of an energy behind what the animal represents. The energy behind what the animal represents. So when you think about Melchizedek, the eighth sense then, in a sense, allows us to break the boundaries of saying Melchizedek was in the line of this, or came from these parents, or came from these parents, because he represented the energy of the parent, the Most High parent, the Most High mother, father, and so did not even need the boundaries of physical genealogy. Melchizedek represented and was king of righteousness, which was a direct reflection of Elohim. King of peace, a direct reflection of Elohim. And so it's sort of showing us that's who we are as Elohim. We are the direct reflection of, we are the direct image of, and so we don't need to be bound by these physical genealogies that say your daddy was a drunk, blah, blah, blah. That tells me even more that that's not important. What's important is not my physicality, but my spirituality and my connection as Elohim to the Most High. Thanks.
Thank you. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that was it there, because we and just piggybacking what you said, Ron, we have to get to the point of, and I'm just saying, mankind in general, do we operate and function, make decisions based on our need for survival, or do we operate and function as who we are? And that's what, when people make decisions on surviving in this material world and this earth, you make a decision based on you're making your survival as less complicated or easier here. You're going to make things harder for yourself long term. But if we are always operating in awareness and acknowledgement of who we are, and things are based on that, and not just based on our need to try and survive at an easier rate here, or the lesser of two decision.
But you just touched it. That's exactly what Barbara just said. We don't have a clue who we are. We're discovering that now. But when you look at mankind through the history of the earth, man doesn't know who he is. And that's what has got us in the mess we're in now. So as we discover that, being that human in the earth, how do we spread that? How do we show that? How do you offer that enlightenment, that awareness in the earth? Is what we're discovering how to do now. So yeah, that's you're exactly right. Operating as who we are, and that is easier said than done.
Just taking the easier road means like an easier survival, on the surface. It's like, oh, well, let's fit together with these guys because we'll all go down, versus operating from the standpoint of who you are. We choose a lot of times to operate based on the need for survival or our perception that our survival hinges on it, instead of, like Barbara says, the genealogy of the Melchizedek was necessary because it shows what the ultimate connection can be. But when we start operating on a need to survive or a need to protect a family name or family member, and making a decision that, hey, yeah, this is going to be, if I cover this up, it's going to help my fellow coworkers. But that's just the need. You're playing the game of survival for mankind versus trying to operate as who you are and making everything about, these principles come from who I am. And that's when we do that day in and day out as a mankind, we operate from the standpoint of just trying to make decisions to survive. Let me get by. I don't want to make any waves. And we fall short when we do that. We get stuck when we do that. We dig a hole for ourselves, and we deny who we are when we make those decisions. And that's where the balance comes in. Either you're going to acknowledge and operate as who you are, or you're going to not deny who you are and make decisions that's going to be based on survival mode. There are someone else that had a comment or question prior to Barbara Ron. I heard a couple people trying to talk at the same time, but that was what Barbara said was a great summation of, with no genealogy. I was trying to reference why no genealogy why no genealogy was significant. She basically just showed why that no genealogy wasn't, it should have been something we should gloss over. It's like it's there for the ultimate example, the ultimate understanding of the energy that should be there.
Yeah. Again, good morning, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. Good afternoon now. But in terms of just all what has been said this afternoon, even referring back to George Watson when he spoke about the importance of addressing, our young people, with regards to where they are, what they're seeking. And I truly believe, that there's young people who are now seeking, the truth, or wanting to know how to navigate themselves through this time and season that we're living in. And as you, continue to, speak on, the substance of these 8 senses, I believe that there are relating in a way that we can go back to beginnings, but I truly, understand today that, how do we move from what we know to what, we feel spiritually that we need to do. And I think that in our conversations, over the last, several, months and weeks, dealing with the 8 sense, we're coming into that intuition now that we can begin to look at how do we apply that for ourselves, but more importantly, how we share the spirituality of who we are, in that way that is accepting to people because of our love of who we are. And I think as you speak about the senses, and as we talk about the senses, it also brings us into a self-awareness and a understanding in terms of our intelligences. And as we look at theories and concepts in terms of Western society, but I think that where we are now is looking at it from that spirituality perspective, that we can begin to see it, in the Elohim that we are. And I think that the creation piece, when we talk about it in terms of utterances, as Barbara has shared, is now being able to understand what those words mean to us, in terms of the linguistic or the language that we're speaking. And I only reference it to John, chapter 1, verse 1, where it talks about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, or with Elohim, and was Elohim. And so I think words are powerful, and I believe we're engaging or sensing it in a more spiritual meaning, that we're taking it from the concepts of education as the system teach, but we're looking at it in terms of going back to beginnings where we can appreciate the word. And I think if Elohim as our foundation, I'm really beginning to see it in our intelligences in terms of those 8 that it speaks about relating it to, the 8 senses. And so there's just, a lot of, things are going through my mind, and I'm just trying to process it, where it can become clear, because, 8 is a significant number, and I won't go into that today, but I think that as you talk about the 8 senses, I've been kind of just trying to do some self-examination in terms of the 8 intelligences. But when I think about our beginnings, it talks about, the 8, principles of Ma'at. And again, I just think that there's something in there, for me, but more importantly, I think you've set that foundation in terms of just moving from what we know to begin to apply it. And like you said, we can, talk all day about, being Elohim, but how do we begin to apply it? And I think that it's beginning to manifest, and it's all because we're putting it out there in the macro. So I just wanted to, just share those thoughts, because, Ron talked about working, and, talked about the law. And there's laws that we all deal with. And at the same time, again, if we can go back to the beginning or to origin, just to see how it all came from a beginning or from a primary source, and how those sources, are being used by, others when we talk about religion. And so if we know that spirituality is before religion, then I think that we're tapping back into the spirituality piece, which I think is important in terms of how do we understand it and interpret it and sharing it with others. So I just wanted to share, that piece, because that thing about the law, Ron and everyone, is important, because there's laws that are being created to create more confusion. But I think that if we can go back, to, the one law, where I think in Psalms 19:7, it talks about the law of Elohim, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul, and the testimony of the Lord is sure, making simple the wise. And so I think when we go back to the spirituality piece and understanding the word, I think it helps us in our journey. So I just wanted to just share my thoughts, with everyone, but I truly, appreciate how I'm seeing it manifest before in my spirit, in my eye, that I'm able to look at how do I apply it. So thank you for letting me share those thoughts, ST and everybody. I'm done.
Done. Oh, thank you. I mean, that's like a kind of a summation and a confirmation that, that we really headed in the right direction. And like I said, the best thing that we do for each other is share, because that's where our growth comes in, and it just kind of builds us up from the, where we are now, because that shared perspective, it just kind of, it helps balance out. It helps give a realistic perspective and understand that, hey, we are moving forward as a group, as individuals as well, and these things resonate. And so that's really all you can ask for, is to make sure things kind of resonate with everyone. And then when we're sharing it, it's kind of like a confirmation that, we're all communicating and moving forward from a different perspective, but at the same time, it means the same thing to us. We just have to look at it from our perspective, and I appreciate it. And and it just kind of puts a bow on everything. It kind of just confirms that, hey, we are on the right path with this discussion and this lesson, because ultimately we just want to be able to apply it in our daily lives. But I appreciate that.
No, I thank you for letting me share, and I think about Barbara. I'm just excited, y'all, about just where I'm at in my life today, and this is truly a blessing, just to be able to hear it in the spirit realm that we're receiving it, and I just want to thank all of you and love all of you just for being who you are, and how it speaks to us in our own way, but just knowing that. The spirit of who we are is manifesting, strongly. And I thank you again, everybody. I'm done.
No, thank you. Yeah. Any other comments or questions for today? I mean, that sounds like a good point for us to kind of put a pin in and reflect and kind of recap individually too, as well as just, a lot to think about moving forward for tomorrow and next week. But any other questions or comments? If not, I thank everyone today, Ron, Barbara, George W., Evelyn, everyone on the call. Really thank you for your time and listening today. And if nothing else, I appreciate it. And we'll pick up tomorrow.
Thank you very much, as for the discussion today.
Thank you, all you teachers, for the discussion today.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Bye.